Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Longing. Today we are going to be continuing to read The Golden Age by Kenneth Grahame. So, let's get going. A whimsical comrade I found him, ere he had done with me. Was it in jest, or with some serious purpose of his own, that he brought me plump upon a pair of lovers, silent, face to face, or a discreet unwinking style? As a rule, this sort of thing struck me as the most pitiful tomfoolery. Two calves rubbing noses through a gate were natural and right, and within the order of things. But that human beings, with salient interests and active pursuits beckoning them on from every side, could thus... Well, it was a thing to hurry past, shamed of face, and think on no more. But this morning everything I met seemed to be accounted for and set in tune by that same magical touch in the air, and it was with a certain surprise that I found myself regarding these fatuous ones with kindliness instead of contempt, as I rambled by, unheeded of them. There was indeed some reconciling influence abroad, which could bring me the like antics into harmony with bud and growth and frolic air. A puff on the right cheek from my wilful companion sent me off at a fresh angle, and presently I came in sight of the village church, sitting solitary within its circle of elms. From forth the vestry window projected two small legs, gyrating, hungry for foothold, with larceny, not to say sacrilege, in their every wriggle. A godless sight for a supporter of the establishment. Though the rest was hidden, I knew the legs well enough. They were usually attached to the body of Bill Saunders, the peerless bad boy of the village. Bill's coveted booty, too, I could easily guess at that. It came from the vicar's store of biscuits, kept, as I knew, in a cupboard along with his official trappings. For a moment I hesitated, then I passed on my way. I protest I was not on Bill's side, but then neither was I on the vicar's, and there was something in this immoral morning which seemed to say that perhaps, after all, Bill had as much right to the biscuits as the vicar, and would certainly enjoy them better. And anyhow it was a disputable point, and no business of mine. Nature, who had accepted me for ally, cared little who had the world's biscuits, and assuredly was not going to let any friend of hers waste his time in playing policeman for society. He was tugging at me anew, my insistent guide, and I felt sure as I rambled off in his wake that he had more holiday matter to show me. And so indeed he had, and all of it was to the same lawless tune, like a black pirate flag on the blue ocean of air. A hawk hung ominous, then plummet-wise dropped to the hedgerow, whence there rose, thin and shrill, a piteous voice of squealing. By the time I got there, a whisk of feathers on the turf, like scattered playbills, was all that remained to tell of the tragedy just enacted. Yet nature smiled and sang on, pitiless, gay, and partial. To her, who took no sides, there was every bit as much to be said for the hawk as for the chaffinch. Both were her children, and she would show no preferences. Further on, a hedgehog lay dead athwart the path. Nay, more than dead. Decadent, distinctly. A sorry sight for one that had known the fellow in more bustling circumstances. Nature might at least have paused to shed one tear over this rough-jacketed little son of hers, for his wasted aims, his cancelled ambitions, his whole career of usefulness cut suddenly short. But not a bit of it. Jubilant as ever, her song went bubbling on, and death in life, and again, life in death, were its alternate burdens. And looking round and seeing the sheep-nibbled heels of turnips that dotted the ground, their hearts eaten out of them in frost-bound days, now over and done, I seemed to discern, faintly, a something of the stern meaning in her valorous chant. My invisible companion was singing also, and seemed at times to be chuckling softly to himself. doubtless at thought of the strange new lessons he was teaching me. Perhaps, too, at a special bit of waggishness he had still in store. For when at last he grew weary of such insignificant earthbound company, he deserted me at a certain spot I knew, then dropped, subsided, and slunk away into nothingness. I raised my eyes, and before me, grim and lichened, stood the ancient whipping post of the village, its sides fretted with the initials of a generation that scorned its mute lesson, but still clipped by the stout rusty shackles that had tethered the wrists of such of that generation's ancestors as had dared to mock at order and law. Had I been an infant stern, here was a grand chance for sentimental output. As things were, I could only hurry homewards, my mortal tail well between my legs, with an uneasy feeling as I glanced back, over my shoulder, that there was more in this chance than met the eye. And outside our gate I found Charlotte, alone and crying. Edward, it seemed, had persuaded her to hide, in the full expectation of being duly found and ecstatically pounced upon. Then he had caught sight of the butcher's cart, and, forgetting his obligations, had rushed off for a ride. Harold, it further appeared, greatly coveting tadpoles, and top-heavy with the eagerness of possession, had fallen into the pond. This in itself was nothing, but on attempting to sneak in by the back door, he had rendered up his duckweed bedabbled person into the hands of an ant, and had been promptly sent off to bed. And this, on a holiday, was very much. The moral of the whipping post was working itself out, and I was not in the least surprised when, on reaching home, I was seized upon and accused of doing something I had never even thought of, and my frame of mind was such that I could only wish most heartily that I had done it. Excuse me. A whitewashed uncle. In our small lives that day was uneventful when another uncle was to come down from town and submit his character and qualifications, albeit unconsciously, to our careful criticism. Previous uncles had been weighed in the balance, and, alas, found grievously wanting. There was Uncle Thomas, a failure from the first. Not that his disposition was malevolent, nor were his habits such as to unfit him for decent society, but his rooted conviction seemed to be that the reason of a child's existence was to serve as a butt for senseless adult jokes, or what, from the accompanying guffaws of laughter, appeared to be intended for jokes. Now, we were anxious that he should have a perfectly fair trial, so in the tool house between breakfast and lessons we discussed and examined all his witticisms, one by one, calmly, critically, dispassionately. It was no good. We could not discover any salt in them. And as only a genuine gift of humour could have saved Uncle Thomas, for he pretended to naught besides, he was reluctantly writ down a hopeless impostor. Uncle George, the youngest, was distinctly more promising. He accompanied us cheerily round the establishment, suffered himself to be introduced to each of the cows, held out the right hand of fellowship to the pig, and even hinted that a pair of pink-eyed Himalayan rabbits might arrive, unexpectedly, from town some day. We were just considering whether in this fertile soil an apparently accidental remark on the solid qualities of guinea pigs, or ferrets, might haply blossom and bring forth fruit, when our governess appeared on the scene. Uncle George's manner at once underwent a complete and contemptible change. His interest in rational topics seemed like a fountain's sickening pulse, to flag and ebb away, and though Miss Smedley's ostensible purpose was to take Selina for her usual walk, I can vouch for it that Selina spent her morning ratting, along with the keeper's boy and me. While if Miss Smedley walked with anyone, it would appear to have been Uncle George. And with that, we come to the end of the episode. So I will say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.